So thank you very much for coming, and go ahead.
So thank you, Juan, for the invitation. I always say that we live in a society that's completely fascinated with technology, and sometimes we forget, I mean, it's awesome, but sometimes we forget that the most amazing, subtle, and incredible technology is nature. And I think this picture sort of reminds us of that, no? I mean, it's been able to produce life in a rock floating in space and provide us with a scenario for, I mean, it has created us, and it has provided a scenario to perform. And we have done it so well that we are already 7.7 billion people on the planet, which means that this is a completely change. There's never been so many people alive in the planet at the same time. And some people say that the only stabilization will come around 11 billion, which changes everything completely. This is the true dilemma that we have to confront. This is the true design problem and challenge that we need to confront. I mean, how can we change our business models in a way that, you know, business models that somehow articulate how we relate to each other and how we relate to this planet. And this combination of the way we've been doing business until now and this demography is breaking down our support system. In a way, if this combination is creating degenerative activity on top of the planet, I always say that we have this primordial ecosystem, and we have established on top of it a system of economics, which comes from the abstract mind of humans. And we are right now in the area of degeneration. Everyone is fighting for sustainability in a way, in thinking in terms of how can we not be aggressive, how can we not do harm to nature and others, but that's not enough. I mean, right now we're in a specific problem is that we are really in a breaking down the ecologic system, and we need to rethink our business models into regenerative models. This is the big challenge that we have in front of us. And this challenge has to start somewhere. So we thought, okay, the place we can start is in the seas, because actually the big machinery, the big element, the big technology that supports the climate stability has been doing so for the last 20,000 years is the sea. Underneath this beautiful sea that we all love and we love to navigate, there's these animal marine forests that are working every day, these thousands of organisms working every day trying to provide us with clean water, clean air, and clean cycles of materia in old fashion, so we can sustain life and the ecosystem as it is. So our company was born in order to try to change this paradigm, to be a company that helps into that direction. And we decided to put our attention and our effort into three directions. The first one is what I call the Proyecto Censo, which means if climate change is here to stay, the only thing we can do with it is to adapt ourselves to climate change. So if you want to adapt to something, you need to really know that something. So you need to observe that something. Observations nowadays is not only a question of technology, it is also a question of technology, but taking measurements has no meaning if there's no interpretation and understanding and integration of that knowledge. So in all our projects, we always have an equilibrium between technology and human beings. Human beings and the inspiration that comes from the mind of human beings has to be incentivated for the challenge of adapting to climate change. So that's what we call Proyecto Censo. The second one is Live Technologies, which is a second brand of the company, which is the recognition that the 20th century, that we call at the company the ecosystem century, has provided us, and we have inherited in a way a lot of technology and a lot of ideas and knowledge from this ecosystem. I mean, this ecosystem invention has created individuals that have obsessively gone into deeper and deeper understanding of science, nature, societies, etc. So all that knowledge, and in the process we have lost in a bit the wisdom of life. We have lost a little bit on the purpose of our lives. So the 21st century might be, or could be, as an opportunity to readdress this issue. I mean, to accept, to acknowledge, and to remercier, this inheritance, and then to provide a new direction, a purpose for replenishing our lives with a sense. That's what we call Live Technologies. That means that if we want to increase the intelligence per cubic meter of implementation of human projects on Earth, we need to establish ecological engineering. That means we need to listen carefully to what's there, to what's the ecosystem like, and to address the situation in order to be a positive impact and not any impact, as we've been doing for the last thousands of years. What we observe is that this ecosystem of the 20th century has left a structure of science that is broken down into little pieces, and you have scientists all over the world that have collected this knowledge and this intelligence, but they don't collaborate within each other. So the first step that we did was to ask each and every one of these scientists if they will come together to, accelerate and give us the tools to regenerate the seas in a faster fashion. That's what we call the consortium Blue Citizen. And the way we can address, and this is where technology is very useful. I mean, all this amount of intelligence that we are gathering needs to be addressed in a certain way. So we addressed it through software. We developed a process of a protocol of design that we call Reef Hopper, that is helped with algorithms that allows us to generate what we call the SER, the Smart Enhanced Reefs. That means underwater substrates that are intelligent enough to be adaptive for this integration of techniques of underwater gardening. In a way, we are inaugurating this new profession that is called underwater gardeners. And obviously, this is because we want to mitigate the impact of this activity of humans creating ports and harbors and pipes and everything that we do in the seas, and also to allow for accelerated regenerative impact. Obviously, this is very beautiful, it's awesome, but it needs to be paid for. So we also thought, okay, so we need to integrate these two ecosystems, the natural ecosystem and the human economic system. We need to allow them to fuse together in order to establish true value to our processes. And that's what we call the regenerative parks. What we thought is that one of the biggest industries in the planet that has been grown, only the COVID has stopped temporarily, is tourism. And tourism has a very positive effects, but it has also very negative effects, mostly in the development of a negative impact socially, culturally, and naturally. So we thought, okay, what if a business plan could transform tourism into a positive force of good impact? So that's what we've developed. It's a regenerative park, which means a leisure park where you can learn and you can actively become, key to the change, becoming an underwater gardener. In the core of this leisure park, we have these underwater gardeners, underwater gardens, which means we're restoring ecosystem, which means we ameliorate biodiversity, we capture carbon. We capture carbon in a permanent way because we're planting a lot of trees, but because of climate change, they're gonna burn very fast. So we're gonna have this carbon coming back to accelerate it. It doesn't really addresses the problem, it just slows it down. So if we produce underwater gardens and underwater forests, I mean, there we have a tool for carbon integration. And obviously this allows for, I always say that in the 14th century, in the Renaissance, you had the gardens as laboratories. And laboratories were the place where you can find exactly the different ways of addressing nature. And that will jump into the agronomy accelerating process in creating food. So that's one of the functions of our parks. It is a big laboratory for progressing in technologies and knowledge for the transformation of our agronomy, obviously maritime agronomy. So the product that we developed to create this economy is this idea that we have the environmental world on one side and the financial world on the other side, and they look at each other like enemies. So instead of, and we're trying to readdress that. I mean, we were asking people to work together, so it is very profitable to take care of nature. And that's a key thing, because we believe that if we don't do that, if we don't connect these two extremes, we won't be fast enough to transform our reality. So the way we do that is that we ask the tourist, the visitor, to become a force that maintains the economy, that it is sustaining constant investigation and constant application of new techniques to adapt to the climate change. And through this involvement of the tourist economy, we have obviously an impact on all the strates of society, which means from the legislation to the companies around this industry. The project was born out of this virtual circle concept, in which we create a facility for edutainment, which means understanding, getting knowledge through fun and leisure, that is supported on what I believe is the smartest move of the European Union, this Green Deal, this idea that we have to lead in the world what it is to make a green impact. And obviously, we have a big return on the investment, which means that we can reinvest in the last forgotten element, which is regeneration, then the sustainability of that regeneration, the safeguard of this regeneration, and a center of scientific monitoration, which means we're going to create data that's going to allow for future generation in a constant way, so it's dense enough and it's consistent enough so that the next generation of scientists are going to be able to take measures on how to adapt to climate change. Obviously, this diagram of the 3 E's translates directly in the implementation of the ODS, so we've become part of the United Global Compact as a tool to the implementation of this, what I think is a very smart plan. So the product itself has 3 parts. The one is on the water, is called the Sea Garden. It is somehow the equivalent of inventing the ski resorts, but with a huge difference. Instead of cutting down trees to make sport, what we do is we plant trees and we make the sport guys be collaborators, becoming gardeners and take carers of this new facility. And it also becomes a sensor of, in real time for climate change. As you know, climate change is going to produce the migration of ecosystems, and these ecosystems are not going to be able to survive the movement, and part of the ecosystem is going to die in the process. But here, as gardeners, we can make a difference, and we can help these ecosystems to also adapt to the new situation. The second part is obviously in our business plan. Only 1 of every 5 visitors goes on the water and becomes a diver, and the other ones connect with this sea and this knowledge through the Garden Gate, which is the area on land. And obviously we live in a technological world, so we have the app where you can create your avatar and produce a relationship with the park and the initiative before, during, and after the visit. Becoming an underwater gardener, sees take care. This park is not only a leisure park, an education park, and a sort of a video game in reality, no? But it is thought as to transmit what we believe is the wheel of values that we need to confront individually and collectively climate change. So we have creativity, obviously, responsibility, rigor. We are all involved, that's why it's for all ages. We have the developed ecological sensitivity, compromise through emotions, coherence. It's obviously nature-based solutions. And we have to teach all of these values through fun and this energy of celebration of life. Within the Sea Garden, what you can see is that we have addressed this scientific community. It's led by Dr. Sergio Rossi and Professor Baruch Grinkiewicz. It's amazing that these guys accepted to be on board. With them, we have created an initiative, as I was telling you, this Blue Citizen consortium that we have been granted, well, the European community is sort of funding the possibility for this to happen. The technology itself is the aggregation of all this collective knowledge, and it goes from an intervention that goes from 0 meters to 200 meters of depth. Obviously, the part that you can visit is only until 30 meters, and the rest is carbon sink and regenerate. It addresses somehow the problematics, all the elements, all the cycles within the ecosystem. We got funding also from the Spanish government to develop the technology to create these luxury houses for fish, which create these smart substrates to address the gardening techniques. And actually, on top of that, you have the gamification layer, which means that somehow the human beings, instead of being destructive and being a part of the destruction, start to change their consciousness on their role on the system, start to think as systemic thinking, and they become gardeners through games. For example, this is the game of plantation, where you have to compete with other divers to locate where your coral goes and to make it faster than the others. So you get points, you get fun, and at the end, you become an underwater gardener. This is also addressed for any situation in every part of the world, because like any garden on land, it depends on the ecosystem you're addressing. The organisms are going to be different, and the conditions for these organisms are going to be different. So we address this with the studies, the preliminary studies, for every project. So the park has this part on the sea, and then it has this park on land. And on land, we have Hort. The heart of the garden is this scientific facility, the Biolab, which has the mesocosm, is the back office of the garden, both on land and on the sea. We have the Aquademy, which is like a scientific museum, but not only for nerds, but also for everybody, because it's a thought in terms of conveying emotion and conveying the basics of science and understanding through these emotions. And obviously, we have developed a completely new way of experience of a dive center, because it's under the umbrella of a sophisticated business model instead of a heroic business model like it is right now. I often say that the diving world right now is like when skiers used to go up the mountain with a mule or by feet. No, it's because of the love of the sport that you do the effort. On land, obviously, as the project is also a transformator for dense, mature tourist destinations, what we do is an exemplary work of how could things be if we build it with the intelligence and the technology that we already have. So bioclimatic architecture, the way we treat food, etc. So everything becomes a demonstration of technologies of positive impact, so that the other businessmen in the area can relate to it and can find a way to transform themselves also. I'm going to go a bit fast into this, because this is, I think I'm taking too much time. But obviously, behind something like this, what you have is what I think is an example of the new way of creating companies, which is transversality of knowledge. You have to put together people from different industries, people from different backgrounds and knowledge that are performing, especially and have learned to listen to each other and to adapt their point of view on reality as to some, and have a 360 degrees point of view. And we have an amazing we have amazing people in the work in the team, like Puri Canal, Sergio Rossi, Christoph Kahler, Mercedes de Pablo, who's actually the ex-director of Portaventura, which is a successful also business case. Tony Marillo, well, a lot of incredible people that are accompanying the company in this moment, like incredible companies that have jumped into helping us creating and developing this model. Actually, the model is so aligned with the European Union and the European Union values that, as you can see, we are directly facing into the next-gen funding that's going to allow us to generate what we believe is a big impact in a new project that we're developing in the Canary Islands. So that's it. I think that's some resume of how we have integrated and thought about how could a new business model be integrating in this new paradigm of this growth of population in the world. So thank you for the invitation, Juan.